welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff that people do in their marketing and how you can not do those crazy stupid things, but instead do smart, meaningful, awesome things with your marketing efforts. And today we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, folks, authenticity. But what drives authenticity? Because I have a lot of conversations about authenticity. And I think a lot of times people assume it's kind of like a light switch. Like I'm either authentic or I'm not. And it's on and off. And I can just turn it on and I can just turn it off. And alas, there's a little bit more complexity behind that. And when we talk about extrapolating the concept of authenticity to a brand, which is really like what I do from a business perspective, that's not available unless the humans behind the scenes have access to a specific level of their own authenticity in so that they can come together as a team and create what it looks like for a brand to be authentic, to live its authentic life, whether that is analog or whether that is digital. And so today we're going to talk about those underlying contributors of authenticity, which is actually personal growth. Notice I did not say professional growth, which a lot of us in the marketing industry probably get access to, but personal growth. And these are things like self-awareness and those types of things that we probably don't talk about at work often enough, but we're going to talk about them today on the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show. And as always, this is not just a conversation for me and my lovely guest of the day, but it is a conversation for all of us. And so if you are joining us live, although most people will not do it, and I see you people not in the comments, but are watching, get in the comments. We would love to hear your experience with authenticity, specifically how that may or may not be showing up in your marketing today, and your experience with some of the personal growth things that we are going to touch on, and whether or not we might be able to be talking about those things more in a corporate work environment. And so get your voice into the conversation, because as much as you may not consider yourself an expert, you're an expert in your own experience, which means you happen to be an expert in authenticity. So please share your voice with us today. Now, I'm super excited to introduce our guest for today because I remember Britta on a networking event some time ago explaining what she did. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're like the same people. We need to be friends. And finally, she is here on the show to have a conversation about authenticity and how we can drive that in marketing, but how we can also drive it everywhere in our lives. So Britta, before we hop into the conversation, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to get to where you are today?
Thanks, Tracy. I'm so excited to be here. Well, my journey began probably 30 years ago in marketing, and it was a very different world back then. And I was in high-tech marketing for quite a while, and then went into coaching. And when I first started my own business, I thought, well, what I really know is marketing, so that's the least I have to worry about. And then very quickly realized, oh my gosh, marketing for myself and my business is very different than doing that for someone else's products. And that really got me started on my own personal journey around it, around the personal development, around visibility and authenticity ultimately.
Oh, okay, so I'd love to start the conversation here, Britta, because I have a similar experience. My experience in corporate was that like marketing was kind of behind the scenes, an individual. You're not really like out there. Maybe you'll be at a trade show, but you're not really the face of the brand, which feels weird for me to even say that because that's like marketing's job is to be the face of the brand. But somehow this gets like separated from the people, and the people go and they do things, but it's really not about showing up and being the brand. And when you go through that transition of shifting from that kind of behind the scenes world now to saying like, wow, like the marketing efforts I have to do as an entrepreneur, look and feel much different than the ones I had to do in corporate. You go, what do you think is causing that expectation in the corporate marketing industry that this is about like being behind the scenes and not so much like being with your customers, which is something we might more commonly see with entrepreneurs?
That's right. Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like there's been a big shift from where I first started. It was very much behind the scenes activities from a marketing perspective. And around the 2010s, when really social media started to take off, and it was a kind of a slow start for most companies to embrace it as really their marketing vehicle, or one of them. I think there was still this way of, well, we can do our old kind of marketing and just plug it into the new tools. And I think more and more now we're realizing, in order to really be successful in some of these new activities, you have to show uniqueness and authenticity in order to get above all the noise in the system.
Yeah. And I feel like there's more noise, right? We have more people, we have easier access to global information than we historically have. So it is a lot easier to get inundated with messaging than it was when you used to be able to be a door-to-door salesman and the only people who lived in your neighborhood were people who were your clients, and it's just not the case for most businesses anymore. And so as we because I see this as like the market is growing, it's getting bigger, we want to reach more people, we want to scale, we want to have these types of conversations that really are associated with like getting larger. And then on the flip side, a lot of these foundational things come about getting smaller, right? Like going internal and being able to find out like, who am I and why do I do what I do and why do I care about that and why do I care about that? So do you find that there's kind of a tension? Maybe let's specifically talk about marketing, right? A tension in the marketing industry of getting like pulled in both directions at the same time?
I do feel so, because in a way, both our clients or customers are getting more sophisticated, so they can see more easily through stuff that doesn't feel authentic. And I also have a sense that more and more the people behind the scenes who do the marketing actually want to express themselves. We have younger generations who just come from a very different place and want to express themselves and have that sense of authenticity about what they're doing. And so I think these different pieces all come together into this place now where we find ourselves exploring authenticity. I mean, 5 years ago, that wasn't even a conversation to be had in marketing, and all of a sudden we are here. And because of the internet and all the possibilities, there is the possibility of having so much more exposure for our products and services. So, which then also means, do we have different voices that we can use to actually connect with different types of customers? And so that's where having a team of people actually plays into expanding, because you are able to use different voices if you choose to, and still express your brand.
Okay, let's dig there a little bit, because I feel like I've dug on a similar topic on this show before, although we've never done an actual specific show on the topic. But this ability to harness multiple voices. So I still think it's pretty common from a marketing perspective for people to create a script, right? We're going to put marketing and sales together on this one, folks. We create a script and then everybody just delivers the same script. We put a brand narrative on the website and then everyone's supposed to just say that thing. Although I've seen two challenges in that. One, like if the narrative that is defined doesn't feel authentic for you, then you are not going to say it. It's just not a thing you're going to get excited about saying. But secondly, if that is actually a mashup of things people would individually say, then what you've created is something that nobody would say. So I'm a big fan of like, yes, at some point you're going to have website narrative, right? Like, so you have website narrative and that's fine, but that like the website is saying it this way and I'm saying it this way and a salesperson is saying it this way, and not that we're telling a different brand story. I always use the example of Three Little Pigs, right? Like everyone understands that we're telling the story of Three Little Pigs, but we may not tell it exactly the same. And we don't actually need to tell it exactly the same in order for people to understand that it's the same story. And so from a personal growth perspective, because this is what we're talking about, how have you found that scripts can both enable or disable people from being able to share their authentic voice?
Yeah, I find scripts, they can be helpful to get an idea of what wants to be conveyed, but in a way, it's very limiting. It feels good for the people who don't have a very clear sense of their own authenticity to hold onto something. But the people who are really into expressing themselves and wanting to create their own authentic voice, it's limiting. So they can help to navigate some of the challenges and having a cohesive message. And if they are limiting, then it's like you said, people are just not following the script. And ultimately, when you come from a perspective of a corporation who needs to connect with different types and not just need to connect with different customers, but also with vendors, with the financial system, with all the different audiences that they have, then each person from their own perspective can bring a unique flavor to connect with these different audiences. So let's say a CFO will talk differently to their audience than a salesperson or the purchaser or HR who wants to connect with future employees. So it's having core tenets or core values that then get expressed through each individual voice and the individual function. That's where I see branding going ultimately.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And this is honestly the thing I love about this show is that it's not like we're ever going to say like scripts are bad. Never use scripts for anything, right? Like, scripts have a place in the process. And there are use cases where scripts can become very limiting. And so this is where we have the opportunity to look at, like, for example, I was talking to a new connection the other day, and they were talking about how they have this discovery call script, but they hadn't been able to like get people to the discovery call stage. And so they didn't really know if the discovery call script works or not, but they have one. I'm like, it's not bad to have that. It's not bad to map out how you might want to go through a discovery call or the pieces of information that you want to collect, especially if you are selling a complex product, right? Like there's going to be things you want to remind yourself, I need to know this, I need to know this, I need to know this, and collect it along the way. But at the same time, really until you try it on and you are saying it, and just one side note on scripts here, folks, scripts that you write and then you read don't necessarily read authentically. So while they might be written authentically, you might not it might not roll off your tongue. It might roll off your pen, but it might not roll off your tongue. And so these are things that are really interesting to experience of yourself from a personal growth perspective, is like, what would I say? And I might say that in writing, I might say that in a follow-up email, or I might say that in a connection request, but I'm never going to say that in person. It doesn't feel right coming out of my mouth. And that's not bad. That's knowledge. And so when you have that knowledge about yourself, about how you share your brand, and again, whether that is a brand that you own or a brand that you represent, this is a great opportunity for you to get closer to your authentic sharing of that message. Okay, that was my side note on scripts, written versus spoken. So Britta, because we're here, I want to keep bringing this back to the personal growth and these types of things. So I just gave an example of personal growth. I don't know if everyone was paying attention or identifies it as such, but it is that process of like trying things on and see how they fit for you and then adjusting it to fit you in a way that fits you better.
Yeah,
Sometimes
absolutely.
things don't roll off the tongue. But like, what are some other examples that you've seen in marketing of like people building up that personal growth muscle?
Mhm. That whole conversation about scripts and templates is a big one that I stumble across over and over again. And so many people who have tried to find a way to do marketing. And I work mostly with small business owners, solopreneurs. So these are typically people who go into business because they're excited about their services, their products, but not about doing marketing. So it's something that doesn't come naturally to them. And so they typically want some kind of script, some sort of system, some template to tell them, what do I do? When do I do it? How do I do it? And then I'm done with it and complete. And it doesn't work that way. And I've watched this and experienced it myself over the last 15 years that all of these systems and templates, they work for the people who designed them because that's their authentic expression. And yes, there is benefit in understanding the flow of the process and having a template of, okay, what are the different steps, maybe even some of the questions that need to be asked, like you described. But ultimately, it always comes down to personalizing the whole process and the script and finding a way to make it your own, to bring your own flavor into it. And so for me, what then typically happens is that people have to realize they need to take a step back to look at, who am I really? What is my true self, my authentic voice? What are the words that I would use when speaking versus writing? And, these things shift too. So, 10 years ago, I was talking about it very differently than I would today. So it's not a one and done thing. It's an ongoing exploration ultimately. And what I have seen a lot of times is people doing the self-growth, the personal growth, to really come into that place of, oh, now I know what it is that I bring to the process that might be different or that is always different from all the competitors out there. So it's that unique voice that then brings the distinction into the marketplace of why someone should purchase your services versus someone else's. So that's typically the biggest shift.
Yeah. And so like, earlier in that example, you used the phrase make it your own. And I mean, because we do similar types of work, I feel like a lot of times what I come across is that people don't know what that means, right? They get it conceptually, but they don't actually know what my own looks like. What would my version of that look like? And we're talking about like, I use podcasting as one example, right? So like you can have a podcast. Yep. But there is not one way that people run a successful podcast. There's lots of different reasons why people have podcasts. So there's lots of different definitions of success. There's lots of different things that feel easy for some people and feel not easy for other people. And this most successful strategy is generally based on what do you like? What is fun for you? But then the trouble comes in, like, I don't know what I like. I don't know what is fun for me. So what are some of these like personal growth topics that you've seen that help people get started on that journey of figuring out like what does my own look and feel like?
One of the first questions I typically ask clients is, how do you naturally connect with others? And so if it's someone who says, I just love to go on social media and I connect with people and have conversations, awesome. If it's someone who says, well, I love to meet people in person and, I don't know, have a coffee with them and get to know them, then that's another way. So kind of starting from how do you naturally connect with others to then look at how can I build a system around that to make it more, to create a stream of connections in that way. That typically starts the ball rolling for me because it always seems so important to look at where is our natural strength and how can I reinforce it and utilize it even more and tap into it to the benefit of my business and my marketing efforts. And so, oftentimes I have people come to me and they're like, oh, I really need to do social media marketing. And I'm like, well, okay, so what's your current efforts? Well, I don't have any accounts. I don't like social media, but I know that's what I need to do. I'm like, well, okay.
My favorite response to that is, do you?
Yeah, exactly.
I need to, do you? Who told you that?
Yeah, that's the formula approach, right? And so it inevitably, I don't think I've met one client that actually worked where they came and said, I have to do this, and it actually worked for them because it's just not their natural habitat, if you will.
Right.
And so if you try to push into it and you're not excited about it, I mean, part of marketing is consistency. And so if you can't create it because it's just not work you like to do, it's not the best effort.
I'm so with you on that. I remember seeing a post on LinkedIn. Someone who runs I would consider it a fairly successful community, did a post about how they hate marketing and they know they have to do marketing and blah, blah. And I'm like, I know this is a rant post. And then there were so many other people that were like, yeah, me too. I hate marketing. And I was like, I feel called to say that if you hate it, maybe there's a different way you should be doing it, right? Like, and I think this is the thing because there's so many programmatic quote unquote solutions now are like, just do this, just do this. This is all you need to checklist things on have a meaningful marketing presence on social media. Well, like, come on, folks. Someone could teach me everything there is to know about Instagram, and I could still feel stressed out every time I go to Instagram because I feel like I need the perfect photo. That isn't Instagram who creates that mindset. That's me that creates that mindset, right? Like, and it's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's just, it's mine. And so if I had to show up on Instagram in order to have social media presence, I'd get very stressed out. Same thing if someone was like, you have to show up on Facebook. I don't like the energy on Facebook. I don't spend that much time there. And we are streaming live to Facebook. So if you're ever looking for me, come find me on LinkedIn. But like, I like LinkedIn. That's my place. It's easy for me to hang out there. I want to go and read messages. I want to connect with people there. I want to have conversations there. I want to spend time there. I want to create content for there. That's fun for me. That's easy for me. And so if we're talking about scaling marketing efforts, folks. Like, if you don't like to clean the toilet, but you have to clean the toilet, are you like gonna want to clean more toilets, right? Like, that's how I'm gonna scale my business, is by cleaning more toilets, even though I hate cleaning toilets. No, you wouldn't choose that. But people choose that from a marketing perspective all the time. I just gotta post on more social media channels that I hate. Do you? Because you can, but do you? Is that going to actually work for you? But I also think, because we're not really talking about this connection between like personal growth, ways of being, authenticity, identity, like these types of things, when we're talking about marketing, we think marketing is just a list of things that is outside of us, not at all controllable by us, that needs to be done. But it's not that. It's when we get that clarity on who we are as a person. And I want to take this into corporate for a second. So, Britta, I know you work mostly with, but you've had your experience with it in corporate as well. This is available in corporate. Also, it's just that we aren't having the conversations, and therefore what's actually happening is we are not optimizing the use of our marketing resources. And then, you know what happens? Then we get AI, and then we get marketing resources that are replaced by AI because we weren't optimizing our marketing resources in the first place. And now we think they can be replaced by AI. But now we're just in this like race to the bottom in terms of the humanity of our brand. And it's very frustrating for me. So, Britta, like some of those things that you were just talking about, like how might you see those being incorporated into a corporate work environment?
You know, one thing that really struck me as you were talking was this thing of I hate marketing. Because that, to me, is a prime one as far as personal growth is concerned, around mindset.
Right.
You know, can we shift that actually to a 180 and say, I love connecting with others? And it's really that connection that is the core of marketing. And so whether you are a solopreneur or you're working in a corporate environment in marketing, and I think even more in a corporate setting, it's so data driven now that this connection to that, it's really about connecting to individuals, to people, to the hearts and minds of people, is getting lost. And that, to me, brings it back to the authenticity piece, to say, how can I authentically connect with others? And go, and I'm not saying that data cannot be helpful, but if it's all driven by data and decisions are made by data, and the goal oftentimes now seems to be to have the data rather than the actual connections, then there is something off in the goal setting here.
Okay. Yes. All the things. And also, if you're watching for the first time today, or you didn't catch last week's show on the market research conundrum, we talked all about data and what it may or may not be telling you that is the truth. And so this is such a good point, because I do think specifically because we have bigger tools and things like that, and then we have those kinds of budgets in corporate marketing, that we get very obsessed with being data driven. And again, it's not that data is bad. Data is good. Go back to watch last week's episode to see how it can trick you, though, because it's not the end all be all. But I think this is an interesting too, and I specifically look at social media, right? Because the algorithms have been created to be data driven, right? We want to show people what their impressions are, what their likes are, and like all of these numbers. That's the data. But at the end of the day, the value that is created from a brand experience perspective comes from connections that are made with people. And whether that's social media or digital ads or going to a networking event or someone driving by your billboard, right? The point, when your brand is remembered, it's because it connected with a person. So we'll make someone remember it. It's not complex. Plus, you don't get to decide what is memorable for people. This is, I think, another one of the conundrums that comes up often in marketing is our assumption that based on all the data we're collecting, I can anticipate what is going to connect for you. Best case scenario, folks, I can hypothesize and I can test it, but I'm probably going to be wrong at least 50% of the time because it's really a guess. And so when we talk about, like, I love what you said about like the natural habitat, right? Like people's natural habitat for connecting with people. And I think this is so interesting because, I mean, I worked in marketing for a long time. I worked in corporate marketing. I worked a lot of trade shows. And when we think about this concept of a natural habitat, I would put trade show pretty much as far outside of a natural habitat as most people operate in. And then we're like, hey, let's throw all of these people into an unnatural habitat and encourage them to interact naturally. I mean, well, this is not going to work, folks. And even if like I say now, like I bring my own intentions to networking events, and the networking event might have a structure, but if it doesn't serve me, then I don't follow the structure and things like that. And it might be fine. But if you're going to a networking or a conference and there's 4,000 people there, right? Like 98% of the people are going to be following the protocol. And if the protocol is act outside of your natural way of behaving, then are we moving closer towards authentic connections? I would say we're moving farther away from authentic connections, which also, folks, like there's a lot of data. I used air quotes for those of you who are not watching, but just listening, out there that says sales cycles are getting longer. But I also think that there's a lot of things that people are doing in marketing that is making the sales cycle longer. That's what the data is going to show, because we're doing it. We're doing things that make the sales cycle longer. The sales cycle is a lagging indicator, right? Oh, it's longer. And then we're like, oh, but it's just the industry. It's just the economy. Is it? Or is it some things that, yeah. So what you're learning about me is if we hang out, I could ask you, is it, a whole bunch of times, because I got something.
It's a good one because it questions the standard thinking of what it might be. But I saw that trend happening probably about 10 years ago, where I thought ultimately, because customer behavior is changing and people are now investigating and reading and researching before they even start connecting with sales, that where before most companies had their sales department drive marketing, and I thought back then that it started to shift, and that marketing, in order to be really effective, actually would have to take the lead to drive sales behavior, because most people now, they've done so much research before they even connect with a salesperson, and that's all marketing content that we can provide in various forms, that it's even more important now, and it's just getting more and more to have relevant content out there, right? And content that speaks to the heart, that connects people to the benefits that they're going to get when they engage with the salesperson, who then can close the deal. But it's, once you start thinking from that perspective, your marketing becomes, or it gets a whole different weight, if you will, and necessity to engage so much earlier.
Well, and it makes me think, because we've kind of moved into the content side of marketing, and I think we can't really talk about marketing anymore without talking about content. And so if let's work on this assumption that the most effective way for us to connect to our people, not all people, but our people, is in our natural habitat, right? As a marketer, then how can I use my content to create that natural habitat? Because it seems like something with the right intentions we should be able to do.
Yeah, it feels to me that's where the authenticity comes back in, because we can talk about the different data and facts about our services and products, but ultimately bringing our authentic voice into it, bringing our heart back into it to showcase we really care about you and your success, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer. That distinguishes us, and that makes also the content more interesting in all the slew of stuff that is just out there, to bring more of our own personal experiences or that of our existing customers, to help people understand how they can be served.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is the thing that I think is so. One of the reasons this show exists, because the internet will tell you create content. That's it. They might tell you how much and how frequently to generate content, but they won't tell you why to generate content or what purpose content, like what role content can play in the overarching relationship building efforts of your organization. And these are the things that are really interesting to take away, is just look at, and no one's interpretation of this information will be the same. But if your natural habitat, the way you naturally connect with people, if your goal was to create your natural habitat through your content, then what would your content look like? And would it look, this is the prime question, folks. Would it look different than it does today? Because there's a lot, and I mean, I'm thinking about this specifically from a like corporate brochureware point of view, right? Where like, someone told me I should share a testimonial once a week. So I share a testimonial once a week. But like, is that maybe if we're not just trying to do the things to check the boxes, we're actually looking at, okay, how can I use my content to create my natural habitat, which will then make it easier for me to connect with people, because that's the point of me showing up, is to connect with people. How might I do that? Would I do that through a show and a conversation? Would I do that? I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it through a testimonial, but how does that testimonial get presented differently if this is the intention versus the intention is just a post? And when we talk about this content environment we live in, which is, I know everyone who watches the show has heard me say it multiple times, I'm going to keep saying it until people understand, is that there is more content created on a daily basis than a human brain can consume in its lifetime. One day, one single day is more than I can consume in my entire brain in my lifetime. So I have to be very picky about what I consume. We cannot consume everything. Nobody, no genius level, anybody can consume the amount of content that exists in the world at the rate at which it's being generated. And the rate is not slowing down, the rate is increasing. And so people are now using their judgment on how do I do that? And if you are the person out there on social media, or even just like out in the market, out in the market, knocking on doors, right? And what you are doing with that experience is allowing people to understand your natural habitat. And if that matches them, you are inviting them in to live in harmony in that ecosystem, in your habitat. Dude, are your competitors doing that? Because I'm pretty sure they're not.
Yeah, and this telling stories like you so beautiful just did. That's a testimonial, if you will. That's the heart connection to connect with people. So it the content might be very different if we are if our strategy is to go through social media versus going to networking events or meeting with people one-on-one, or going on stage, or whatever it is, it will be different. And yet the underlying, if you go to a more subtle level, the frequency, the radiance that we emanate as we are sharing these stories, that's what connects people with who we are and if there is a fit. So, when you look at communication, I think 10% is basically done on the facts, on data. Everything else is, are we connecting on a personal level ultimately? And that can be much harder when it's in social media than it is when you're meeting people in person, because there's an immediate connection there, or not.
Well, and I think I think there's a inaccurate assumption that they can't be the same, right? How we interact with people in person can't be the same as digital and vice versa. Personally, I have found that not to be true through my skill building and personal growth journey. But I also think one of the things, so like if I think about me and the people I connected to when I was in high school, right? Like I'm not assessing it at that point, right? Like I'm just feeling who I might connect with and I'm having conversations with them. I'm not trying to overanalyze it. And quite often from a marketing perspective, we overanalyze it because we've created this like target profile of people that we want to sell our services to. So now what we're trying to do, and I don't think it's intentional, but what commonly happens is like, well, I want to change me to match them. I want them to feel like they're safe in their natural habitat. And I'm going to go into their natural habitat and not stomp on any flowers, except I'm a tornado. Right? They're like, I mean, it doesn't work, right? It just doesn't work. I can't change myself that much to match that natural habitat. And so from a targeting perspective, what would you say is important to bring into the conversation? Because this isn't just about me being me, right? I'm out here me being me to accomplish something, to sell something, to solve problems, however we want to look at that. And so there's my people, my target audience, or my ideal client profile, or whatever we want to call them today, over there. And we need to work together. We need to work together and understand like what is our natural habitat instead of what's my natural habitat and what's your natural habitat, because they might be aligned, but I mean, I think it's almost close to impossible for them to be identical.
That's a great question. I think that goes to the heart of the matter for me, because in a way, I've seen that many times where, and that's where personal growth comes in, where especially service providers, coaches, healing arts professionals, etc., they come from their own personal story of how they healed themselves and now help others. And that can be a very powerful story to tell. And yet what I've seen sometimes is that they are still in that, in their own wounding, if you will, and use that as they bring that energy into the room with them, if you will. Right. And so people don't really see how it can help them to work with that person, because they still seem kind of in their own personal development stuck. So that's one thing that came to mind as you were talking.
And I would also say that that's equally relevant in corporate marketing, because while we're not talking about it as much, so individual marketers may not really have clarity on the fact that they aren't understanding the mission, they aren't understanding the brand voice, they aren't just, so they are equally stuck. And then we just go out there and it sounds like we're trying to convince people to do stuff, and like nobody convinces you to do anything.
Yes, that's the other point, because we oftentimes come with the agenda of ultimately, I want something from you. I'm sharing my content with you, and in exchange, I want something from you, which is I don't know, your email address or the discovery call or ultimately the sale. And so having that expectation and that energetic hook that I'm due something because I offered this, that to me is oftentimes what makes it less successful, let's put it that way. And so if we can truly come from a place of service and knowing, okay, not everyone who reads this and who connects with me will ultimately purchase my services or content, and that's okay. And we can relax into knowing that the right people will come and will connect with us and will purchase our services. That relaxation then can actually help bring forward our authentic expression, because we have that inner trust developed to know the more we put ourselves out there and do our marketing and are engaged in building connections, something will happen.
Yeah, and I think it's just so interesting because I like the fact that you went to the energetic level, because I also feel like I have a really great friend who I've heard say many, many times, I hate sales. I hate marketing, hate sales. And I remember asking her once, like, but don't you love creating community? And she was like, well, yeah, but that's not sales. And I'm like, well, it is when you're selling a community, right? Like the whole point of this is to build community. The problem you're solving is community. It's not selling, right? So like you can go out and you can change that underlying energy that you have, and I'm not out here selling, I'm out here helping people. Then again, that's the root of being able to make something scalable. And then if you're going to say, okay, I'm out here helping people, and equally, like, folks, marketing is by nature meant to be freely consumed. Right? So when someone does a Super Bowl ad and pays millions of dollars for it, they pay millions of dollars for people to consume information about their brand for free. So what they've decided is this is an investment that makes sense for me to give away for free. Now, most of us don't have $1 million for a Super Bowl ad. And do we need to? Probably not. But the underlying decision about, like, what can I feel good about giving the market for free, because marketing is for free. Marketing is about free consumption. Does that mean you should give everything away for free? No, that's a different problem for a different show. People giving away too much stuff for free. But like, marketing is meant to be given away freely. And so what can you do that you feel good about giving away freely that can allow people to enter into a business funnel should it make sense for them, but also that, I mean, you guys, why do you think I do this show? I do this show because it's fun, right? I wouldn't show up here every week for an hour talking with marketing experts who I also have to spend time meeting in other places in order to get them on the show. Like, there's a time investment that goes into that. But for me, that's a good time investment. I get to talk to people who are inspiring to me. I get to share knowledge with people who might not otherwise have other access to it. And if people would get in the comments, we'd actually know who was here. But we don't, and that's fine. But also, like, I feel good giving that away. And someone else might not feel good about giving that away. And so a live stream show is maybe not the right strategy for you. But if we look at, and this does go back to our like personal preferences, or if you're working in a brand, your brand preferences as the brand, not as your ideal clients, right? What do we feel good giving away? And how do we go about giving that away and creating value for people in the market? Sometimes, I mean, like, you can do a Super Bowl ad for $1 million, or you can do a LinkedIn live stream for free. Right? I paid for StreamYard's premium version, but it's like $63, right? Like there's lots of things that you can do. And so when it is in alignment with your natural habitat. Like, I'll be honest with you guys, this feels like my natural habitat. I love this show so much. I have like some days I'm like, maybe I should do 2 shows a week, but I don't have time for that. But like, because it feels good. I want to come here, right? So like, I would encourage you. This is like my big takeaway from this episode is like, how can we look at whether you are an entrepreneur or you're working in a marketing team or you're even just like looking out in the market about like marketing experiences that you're consuming, like, where is your natural habitat? Where do you feel good? Where do you feel like you thrive? Where do you feel like you belong? And like, what if more of your marketing efforts were rooted in creating that natural habitat for you? Assuming that now, if I feel comfortable connecting with people, it'll probably open the door for me to connect with people. I mean, it seems pretty simple, Britta.
Yes.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I was struck by you calling marketing for free, and there is that aspect, but in exchange, what we're really receiving is the exposure, and that's what ultimately then drives engagement. So, when you come from that place of looking at marketing as creating exposure to the right people to find you, then and doing that in your natural habitat, I think that's a really good starting point to bring your authentic self to that whole process.
So good. Like, and sometimes, folks, I feel like these are really they're like pretty simple concepts, right? The concept of using your marketing to create exposure of you in your natural habitat, because that is the easiest way for you to connect with people. And in so doing, shortening the sales cycle so that you can connect with people that way. There's just, I mean, obviously I can't pull all the companies in the world and ask them, what are your intentions with your marketing? But I would guess that 0 people that I pulled would answer unprompted, create exposure of us in our natural habitat, right? Like, people are not thinking about marketing that way. And even stay tuned for an upcoming blog post about this concept of natural habitat, because I love it so much, and I will attribute the idea to Britta. But we don't, again, we get so caught up in doing things and profiling our target clients that we forget what our natural, maybe we forget, or maybe we haven't even tried to figure out what our natural habitat is. And what if we just took some of that time back, some of that intention back, to look at our natural habitat? And once we know what it is, how can we create exposure to people of that? Then, like, this isn't that, we don't have to think about that many things. We just have to think about that, and whether or not we're delivering on that, and whether or not it's actually being meaningful, right? Like,
yeah,
we have to track all the way through the process. But unless we start at the beginning, then we're starting at the back end, which doesn't really make sense.
And it allows you to really embrace your true self. That, to me, is the biggest piece of in all of that.
Yeah, well, and again, I think a lot of time, I mean, I talk about authentic marketing constantly. So for me, that's like the point at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But this is not what most people are talking about on a day-to-day basis when it comes to marketing. And a lot of times, just like we said at the beginning of the show, what does it even mean to do authentic marketing? But if we can, you don't like the word authentic, fine, right? But if we take it back to this, like, I mean, I'm thinking about a zoo, and I have mixed relationship with zoos because I love to see the animals that I can't see, but I don't like they are like in this tiny quote unquote natural habitat that shows you what it's like for them to actually live where they live. But we all know that's not a natural habitat. And those are the types of habitats we're creating for ourselves on a day-to-day basis in our marketing. So what if we just like forgot about that and started exploring what feels like my natural habitat? And I'm also going to throw in, like, give yourself the opportunity for this to be like a very unique mashup, right? I had this very like meaningful experience for like, because I was in New York last week and I love New York. I love the people. I love the buzz of the city, but I love it for like 5 days at a time. And I live in the country. And then I came home and I was walking and I was like, oh, I love it here. So there's like something about the buzz and hype that I love. And there's something about the peace and the calm that I love. And those two things might seem very polar opposite to people. But if you get creative and start looking at like, well, both of these things are actually me. Part, I need all of these things. How do I puzzle together how to create that in my habitat? Well, then folks, you have a completely unique habitat, which then stands out from the other, not at all curated habitats that are existing in other people's marketing.
I love it.
Oh, Britta, this was such a fun conversation. If people want to learn more about you and how you help small businesses, where is the best place for them to find you?
LinkedIn and my website, but LinkedIn, Britta Fischlin. Yeah.
And Britta is tagged in the post associated with this live. So if you are watching, or if you are watching the replay, then you can just click on her name and be taken straight to her profile and connect from there. But as I say at the end of every show, if authentic marketing, personal growth in marketing is something that is important to you, something that you're trying to invest in right now, something you're trying to create an intention around right now, do not let this be the last conversation that you participate in. Today, we provided you with lots of ideas, but no answers. The answers are in you. And so if this becomes the first conversation of many that you have, I would be very excited about that. And I would be excited to continue the conversation with you. I know Britta would be excited to continue the conversation with you. And you guys, if you got into the chat, guess what else you would see? Who else is in the conversation? And you could hold each other accountable. That's one of the benefits of the chat as well. Maybe next time. But stay in the conversation until you've tried on enough things that you can say, yep, this fits me, or yep, this doesn't. And like, this is my natural habitat. And if it's not yours, that's fine. We would both be very excited for you to discover and use that type of information about you to build not crazy, stupid marketing, but really important, connective, meaningful marketing. And with that, everyone, thank you so much for watching the episode today. Thank you again to Britta for sharing so many amazing insights. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.